Welcome back to Never Enough Novels for another round of monthly reviews of all of the books that I read in December. This month I have 9 books to share with you, and I like to share both the books that I loved and those that I didn't like as much to help you decide which books you want to read and which books you might want to skip. I'm including the links to everything down below, so if you see something you're intrigued by, you can buy it from Amazon and help support this channel along the way. Also, make sure you hit like on this video and subscribe to see even more book recommendations in the future. Let's dive right into my short and sweet book reviews. I'm sharing them from the books that I liked least to the books that I liked most during the month. And I'm going to kick off the list with My December Darling by Lauren Asher. I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. It's actually a novella, so it's a short story. I picked it up initially because of the cover. It's adorable. Like, I just absolutely fell in love with this holiday romance cover, so I was like, I have to try this book out. I ended up listening to it on audio though, which I mean kind of makes that whole thing a moot point, but here we are. Unfortunately, though, I just didn't connect with this book at all. It felt like it was really long despite being a shorter length, and I just kind of kept avoiding picking it up because I just wasn't connecting with the characters all that much. I think it's part of her like Lakefront Billionaire series, or has some characters that are mentioned in that series maybe. So that might have been why I just like didn't have enough backstory or wasn't familiar with them. So it's ultimately a romance between two workers in the hospital industry. I think one's a traveling nurse and one works as an ER doctor. And the traveling nurse is home in this small town just for her sister's wedding. So she's the maid of honor in the wedding, and the other guy is the best man. So they obviously interact a lot because of that. They don't get off on a great start. I think there's some history there, but over time, kind of learn more about each other and reconnect over Legos, which was cute. But there was just nothing that stood out about the story that really intrigued me. So it was just kind of a run-of-the-mill romance, and I'm usually just looking for a little bit more from my romances, something that I really connect with, or like a really unique story or plot line. So this just didn't have that. But again, if you've read Lauren Asher in the past and love her, or I think if you read like this Lakefront Billionaire series, you might be more familiar with these characters. So it's not something that I like disliked and absolutely don't recommend. It just wasn't for me. Next up is Keep Me by Sarah Kate, and I ultimately gave this one just 3 stars. Again, I was drawn in by the cover and the setting because it's a Scottish romance. Also, Sarah Kate is known for her spicy romances, so I knew we were going to be getting into that with this one. But it felt very trite, and a lot of the writing just wasn't kind of up to my normal romance standards, and I was just hoping for a lot more, I guess, plot and story in this one. So the basic premise is that the main character Sylvie shows up at Killian's Scottish estate and breaks into his house because she's there with her boyfriend, and there's some sort of like family artifact in the manor that she wants to get a picture of for him. But Killian discovers her in there and kind of like threatens her, and he's this like big brooding man and she's this kind of spitfire of a girl. So their first interaction gets off to like a horrible start, but then I think a little while later Sylvie is approached by Killian's sister with a business proposal because Killian is like refusing to get out of this manor house and the rest of his family wants him to leave. So Killian's sister gets Sylvie to agree to marry him so that after a year, the house can be transferred by his wife to someone else. So they're basically plotting against Killian to get the house from his hands. So Sylvie agrees because it comes with a huge amount of money that she desperately needs. So she moves to Scotland and like marries this brooding, surly guy and finds out all sorts of interesting details about his history, and some spicy ones at that. I mean, they hate each other at first, but this turns into, of course, like an enemies to lovers. But again, it just felt like a romance that was heavily based on the spicy parts with like a lot of filler in between. Sometimes I'm really in the mood for that and absolutely love it, but this time I just didn't really connect with the story all that much. Up next on my list at 3.5 stars is I'll Be Gone for Christmas by Georgia K. Boone. This is a holiday romance and it's got a house swap aspect, so if you love the holiday, this might be a good option for you. Bee and Clover are our 2 main characters who agree to swap houses for the holiday season. Bee is looking to get away from her high-pressure tech job in San Francisco, so she swaps houses with Clover, who lives in kind of a small town in maybe Ohio. And Clover just needs to get away after her mother's death and a bunch of like suffocating issues at home. And she's recently announced her split from her longtime fiance and childhood friend and lover. So she just needs to get away for a bit. So Clover heads to San Francisco and Bee heads to this small town, and they start to interact with each other's kind of lives and friends and family. This again was cute. It just wasn't like one of my favorite holiday romances of the season. But if you like the holiday and love the idea of this kind of swap of houses during the holiday season, then this probably would be a great one for you. Going in a completely different direction is Run by Blake Crouch. This was a 3.5-star book that honestly I might bump up a little bit because I read it in 24 hours. I saw this on Libby and was intrigued by it because obviously I know Blake Crouch for some of his more recent, like highly successful novels. And I was surprised to see he had a new one coming out that I hadn't heard about. But then I did a little bit more research and realized this is a reprint of, I think it's his very first novel. So it's from a long time ago and is just being reprint because obviously he's very popular now. So with that in mind, it definitely did not live up to his normal standards, and it felt almost like a completely different writer from what type of stories we're used to him telling now. Run is like a straight out heart-pounding thriller. It's set in this weird time in society where a virus or illness or something has taken over a big part of the population and turned them extremely violent. So all of a sudden, there are just tons and tons of cases of like murders and acts of violence and all this sort of stuff throughout the United States. And we're focused on this one family who is trying to escape from their home and get away from all of the violence and just survive this new kind of apocalypse situation. And throughout the story, we don't really know what is causing certain people to turn violent, and kind of everyone they come across, they don't know if they're one of the ones that was affected or one of the ones that's just trying to survive. So it's told over I think it's just a couple of days or maybe less than like 2 weeks about what this family goes through trying to survive these encounters with the violent people, going through like really harsh conditions in the mountains, trying to find food and all this sort of thing. So it is definitely a heart-racing novel, and I was addicted. I mean, that's why I read it in 24 hours, because I was just dying to find out if the family survived and what happened to them, and ultimately kind of what was the cause of this strange shift in the population. With that said, though, there were definitely holes in the plot and some things that didn't really make sense, and like the writing was thrilling, so you can see like the glimpse of his genius that comes in later books, but it wasn't like the best written thriller that I've ever read. So like 5 stars for making it intriguing and like heart pounding, but closer to like 3 stars for the actual writing and kind of how well plotted it was. But if you're just looking for something fun, like turn your brain off and just enjoy this crazy story, I would recommend this one because it was a wild ride. It is pretty gory. I mean, he gets into some detail about what they see and like what is done to people. So just keep that in mind if you don't normally like that in your stories. But if you can get past that or just don't really care, then it is a really entertaining thriller. Now we're getting into the books that I definitely rated higher and loved a little bit more, starting off with Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. This is a sequel to The House on the Cerulean Sea, which is one of my all-time favorite books, and I recommend it to absolutely everyone because I feel like it's just one of those heartwarming stories that everyone needs to read at least once in their lives. However, you do need to read the first book before you jump into this one because we pick up directly with Arthur and Linus on their island taking care of the kids who they're in the process of adopting. So these are magical creatures and they are living in a society that does not appreciate anything different. So there's a huge theme throughout the story about being accepting of others no matter what they look like or how they identify. And you will find that belief woven throughout the entire story. But with this one, we pick up with a little bit of Arthur's backstory and we learn more about how he was treated when he was young and what he has been through since then to kind of get him to the point where he's now the owner of this orphanage on his island. So Arthur is kind of facing down this government that like wants to take his children away from him. So him and Linus and the rest of the characters are going up against another inspector who comes out to the orphanage to try and figure out what's going on there and basically shut them down. We also have a new magical child on the island, so we're also getting his interactions with the other kids and with Arthur and Linus, which is just adorable. I loved this one too. It probably didn't have the same impact as the first story just because I think the first one was so unexpected and so wonderful that it's just hard to recreate those feelings. But it is another solid addition, and I am so happy to just get back into the world with these characters and get to read about them again. Jumping back into romance is Christmas with the Crank by Courtney Walsh. This was a 4.5-star read for me. It's another holiday romance, and it's set on a Christmas tree farm, which I absolutely loved. Our main characters are Liam and Olive. Liam and Olive were really good friends when they were kids, and by the time they got a little bit older, there was definitely like a spark there, but Liam never really took the opportunity to turn it into anything more serious or more romantic. So over time, Liam, I think, moved away, and Olive has stayed in the small town, but they just basically lost connection. Now, Liam is back for the holidays because his parents are planning to sell their Christmas tree farm. So he was asked to come back for basically the last hurrah. And Olive was brought on as a kind of consultant for this Christmas tree farm because she knows his parents very well, obviously. They want her help in making this like the best season ever. So they're using her expertise in marketing and in event planning to try and create a way to just go out with a bang and make this a wonderful last memory for everyone in the town and for the people at the farm. So over the course of the holiday season, Olive and Liam are kind of forced to work together again. There's definitely some like animosity and confusion at the beginning because they just aren't really sure where they left things and where they are now. But the sparks are still there, and I loved seeing their relationship change from kind of strangers going back to friends and then to something more. The setting is obviously just a wonderful factor as well. I adored reading about the operations of the farm and the side characters that worked there, as well as seeing Olive get her confidence back to try and turn this into something wonderful. Courtney Walsh can just do no wrong in my eyes. I adore her stories when I want like a nice, heartwarming, sweet vibe, and this absolutely lived up to my expectations. Another holiday romance I read in December was Love You a Lot, Kate by Amanda Elliott. I also gave this one 4.5 stars, and we are now going from Christmas to Hanukkah. I generally like to include at least one Hanukkah romance in my repertoire for this season because I just feel like it's a really interesting way to kind of get to know the holiday better, and this book was perfection for that. The main premise is our main character Abby is asked by her town to create a Jewish like Hanukkah festival to kind of compete with the other local Christmas festivals. They're hoping to find a way to be a little bit unique and bring new people into their town. And Abby is like the token Jewish person in town, so she's now suddenly finds herself trying to create a festival based on Hanukkah with almost no resources and no idea what to do. Unfortunately, she discovers that the only other Jewish person in town that she knows of is Seth, who is one of her most annoying customers at her cafe. Seth is extremely cheerful and always way too happy at like 8 in the morning when he's getting his morning coffee. This definitely has grumpy sunshine vibes, but in the opposite of the normal way because Seth is all happiness and joy and Abby's our local grump. Seth isn't willing to do this just for free though, so he needs some help as well, and he agrees to help with the festival and use his connections in New York to kind of find vendors and people that might be willing to help if Abby will come home for the Hanukkah holidays with him so that he can kind of get his mother off his back and bring home like a nice Jewish girl. So Abby spends time with Seth in New York with his family during Hanukkah and sort of rediscovers her love for the Jewish community and the holiday itself. But while Abby is in New York, she's obviously also trying to find vendors for her Hanukkah festival and organize that event. Except she's getting a lot of pressure and criticism from the person in town who asked her to do the event. Because as it turns out, this lady actually wants it to be a Christmas festival that's just overlaid with some Hanukkah stuff. So she wants a tree that's just decorated in blue and white, or she wants Christmas cookies that are, maybe just in Hanukkah designs. So Abby is struggling a lot with standing up for herself and for her holiday, and this is where this book really shines because she talks a lot about what it's like to celebrate Hanukkah during like the overwhelming Christmas season and how it feels to have her holiday kind of slightly represented in, overall holiday festivals or holiday activities when really there's nothing Jewish about it except maybe some blue colors. But it's all done in a way that's not preachy or too overbearing, and it really helped me understand kind of what it's like to be a Jewish person during December when the overwhelming majority of things are Christmassy. I really liked how all of that was wrapped up in this like charming romance between Seth and Abby as well. They were so much fun to root for and see how their relationship changed from kind of animosity on Abby's part to like a reluctant understanding that Seth might actually be really good for her. I highly, highly recommend this book. It's probably wonderful to read any time of year, but especially during the holiday season. It was eye-opening and charming and sweet all at the same time. On a completely different note, the next book I'm recommending is What Does It Feel Like by Sophie Kinsella. This was a 4.5-star book for me. It is also a shorter book, more like a novella. Sophie Kinsella, you may know her for her famous Shopaholic series. She normally writes really fun, lighthearted romances with characters that are just hilarious and sometimes kind of ditzy or superficial, but that you'll absolutely fall in love with. What Does It Feel Like is completely different for her. So, Sophie says that this is her most personal story yet because it mimics her experience with cancer that she's been going through for the past few years. So, our main character is a writer who discovers that she has a terminal brain cancer that gives her basically like a year or so to live. And through a series of kind of short snippets throughout the time from when she was diagnosed, through surgery to recovery, and kind of learning to relive her life, we get an eye-opening experience into the joys, the lows, like what it's like for her family to go through this kind of horrifying experience. This is such a unique read, and I'm just so impressed with how Sophie Kinsella was able to take her own experiences and turn it into this poignant story that shares a little glimpse into what it's like to have to fight cancer with those that you love. My second to last book is called The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ally Carter, and this is a unique mixture of romance and mystery. Our two main characters are Maggie and Ethan, who are both mystery and thriller writers. They were invited to spend a few days at the home of one of their biggest fans. But when they get there, they discover that this person is actually one of the greatest mystery writers of all time. Maggie is over the moon about this opportunity and losing her mind at the chance to meet this writer, despite the fact that it also means she'll have to spend a few days with Ethan, who has been her longtime nemesis. However, things take a turn for the weird when Eleanor disappears one night from a locked room. All of a sudden, this turns into a wild kind of mystery about what happened to her, but then more and more dangerous things start happening, and Ethan and Maggie and the other guests realize that this might actually be a dangerous game instead of just some trick by Eleanor. This was like a little bit spicy, a little bit mysterious, and just a ton of fun to read. It's a very unique novel because you've got this element of romance as well as a mystery about what's going on, and I just loved every second of it. Finally, the last book I'm going to share today is actually one of my favorite books of the entire year, and it's called Is She Really Going Out With Him by Sophie Cousins. This was my top-rated romance novel of 2024, so it obviously got 5 stars, and it's one that I adored and think everyone should try. Is She Really Going Out With Him is about Anna, who is a recently divorced mom of 2, and she's a columnist for a paper who kind of has her job threatened when a new person takes over her company, and tells her that she needs to be more personal and more open and connect with younger readers in her column. To make things worse, the new guy at her office, Will, is like some hotshot person that everyone loves and who is also sort of gunning for her column. So Anna comes up with an idea to go on dates with people that her children actually pick out for her. And these are all people they've met in real life, so no online version at all. Meanwhile, Will sneaks in there and suggests a parallel column where he will talk about his experience with online dating, kind of as a parallel to her real-world dating. So the two of them go on a series of dates and kind of have to work together to figure out a theme for each week and end up spending more and more time together, which unfortunately for Anna has the effect of him winning her over, and she realizes that there is more to him than just this like suave, charming guy that everyone else gets to see. There were so many moments that were like laugh out loud funny as well as heartwarming and poignant throughout this entire book. I just adored Anna as a character. She's incredibly relatable, and I love that she's kind of more of a middle-aged character who has kids, and she's balancing being a mom and struggling with her work life while also trying to figure out her romantic life and trying to make decisions for herself but also her family and weighing which one is more important. There were just so many things that I could connect with personally that made me absolutely love this book. Plus, one of my favorite parts were at the beginning of each chapter, she includes her recent Google searches, which were just so funny and relatable and things that I have definitely looked up before. And it was just a small addition to the book that had such a great impact. Overall, this was just an incredible romance that was solid all around, and absolutely one that I think anyone who loves the genre or may just be dipping their toes into it will adore. That covers every single book that I read in December. Hopefully you found some new ones on your radar that you want to check out. If you want to see my previous reading wrap up, you can head here to check out all the books that I read in November, and stay tuned for next month.